In this exercise, we're going to be discussing creating extruded features. Use the Extrude tool to create extruded features from existing sketch profiles. Considered sketch extrude features require an unconsumed and visible sketch to be available. If the sketch contains a single closed profile, that profile is selected automatically whenever you start the Extrude tool. The Extrude tool is going to be your most used based feature. What I mean by that is the very first feature you create, remember, is called a base feature. Most of the time, the extrude is going to be that base feature. Sometimes you will have a revolve, and then even less you'll have sweeps and lofts. But a majority of the time, your extrude is going to be your very first feature. You do not have to have a closed profile sketch to create an extrude. You can create surfaces by having an open profile, but a majority of the time you want to make sure you have a closed profile. What this gives you, as soon as I select the extrude command, it automatically selects the only closed profile in this drawing and pops it up. Makes it very easy to use and very intuitive. With extrude, we have several different options. And we can start with flipping in either direction 1 or direction 2. You can think of this as either up or down. Then you can go symmetrical out from the middle. I like to make my parts symmetrical whenever possible because that makes the origin plane in the middle of my base feature. So therefore, it's going to kind of put the center of gravity there, and anything that I need to work from the outside in or inside out, I have that internal feature ready to go. If my part's going to end up being very asymmetrical, it's not going to work. But if it's going to be a very symmetrical part, I like to have my center planes available for constraining in assemblies later on, and some additional features that makes it very easy to use down the road if you use the symmetrical whenever possible. The next option we have is asymmetrical. And what this allows it to do is go a distance in one direction and then a separate distance in the other direction. And I can actually flip which way that is. Be careful with these because some of the automatic bill of materials and parts list and things like that will not pull that second distance. So for example, if you have a channel or tube or something like that, it would only see it as being 1 inch long. It wouldn't see the 0.25 inch added onto the end. Now, this is the full toolbar that I'm using right here. Inventor also gives us the ability to roll this up and get it out of our way and gives us this little mini toolbar. We have many of the same commands on this toolbar as we do on the main toolbar. There are a few such as the asymmetrical where you need to get to these dialogues. I try to roll this up and get it out of my way whenever possible because screen real estate is a premium, and so I like to do whatever I can with this mini toolbar. Now, the next issue you may run into is what if you have multiple closed profiles? You can see here a circle is considered a closed profile. So I have 4 circles, and then I have this outer profile that's also closed. So this time whenever I hit extrude, you can see Inventor's asking me to tell it what to do. It tries to use its artificial intelligence, but it can only go so far. So it's telling me by making this little arrow red in the full profile, or down here in the bottom left-hand corner, to select the profile. It's saying, hey, pick what you want, and then Inventor will understand what you're doing. If you accidentally pick too much, if you grab those holes and you don't mean to, we can uncheck those holes by holding down the control key and reselecting them. If you go too far and undo back, basically, you can just reselect that profile again. With Inventor, we also have optional termination tools. We can decide whether or not we want to cut this out as a whole or extrude it up as a peg. We can also say, how do we want this to end? If I choose 2 and select this face over here, what it does is it extrudes that cylinder up to be even with this face. You'll notice I have it checked to terminate on feature to extended face. What that does is it extends this face out over my feature, because if not, it's going to say, hey, you can't make me run into that. I don't exist there. So I can tell it to extend that out and I can say OK. Next, if I come over here and I cut these out here, flip that down, you see that's going to cut those out. If I go up or I click on join, it's going to automatically want to go up and add mass. If I click on cut, it's going to go down and it's going to subtract mass. And then intersect, the third option, this is really good for spacers and wedges and things when you need to catch where two objects intersect. It's also good for creating packaging. If you're trying to create some kind of void and you're trying to model that void for packaging and things like that, you can use the intersect. For this one, I'm just going to say cut. I'm going to say through all. And that will do exactly what it says. It just goes through everything. If I take a look at this sketch, you can see it's just a hole, center of this part here. And I say extrude, select that hole. I could just extrude it in either direction. Or what I could do is I could say come up here and extrude that hole between this plane and this plane. And I can either say cut that out or fill it in. Situation like this where it's really tight, you're not really going to have too much of a problem with this. But in situations where you have large gaps and you're trying to cut something out, this can be a very powerful way to go in between two objects. Next, I can take this and I can say extrude this, say to next. And you'll notice that it terminates to the outside of that irregular face. And that face is not even centered on that cylinder. It's actually slightly offset. This is really good for extremely irregular shapes, or when you're trying to extrude to the side of something like this. It allows us to automatically fill in any gaps. Inventor understands that you want to extend all the way to that. Now with that, we have the option to come in here and add a taper. This taper is very powerful when you're doing any kind of molding or any kind of die making where you need to have that extruded part or molded part pull out, especially plastic parts. You need to have a face draft. You can build that in with the extrude. Or we can use it in a situation like this where we're going to go through and just want to kind of come out not quite tangent to the outside of the cylinder. We just want to add a nice taper to our part for aesthetic reasons. Hit OK. So now if I create a new sketch here, and then I say extrude, cut down, say 0.75. And then if I come over here to this little cylinder over here and I say extrude 2, you'll notice that it stops on the outside face here. If I wanted that to go all the way through to the other side, I can go to the alternate solution and uncheck minimum. And what that does is it'll go through to the inside face of that round. And that's what our alternate solution does for us. It says, do you want to go to the first face or the next face? This is only available for between and to next, and objects where you're going to be hitting that irregular shape face, such as round. If I hit OK there, you can see that it goes all the way through and creates that. With extrusions in Inventor, the easiest way to edit them is just double click on it, and we get most of all of our options. There are some options such as going back to a surface and creating multi-bodies and things like that, that it will not automatically let you go back and do. And if you're having performance problems, you can uncheck the preview, but I highly suggest you don't. The preview command is, an integral part of the design process. If you have to wait until it finishes calculating every time, you can miss some really important stuff there. So with extrusions, we can do a lot with that. Your imagination is the limit. So play with this, see what you like, and get creative.